Some would say that this might be the greatest college football weekend of all time coming up, and I'm willing to agree to an extent that it just might be the case. We have an historic college football weekend on our hands as we enter week number 4, and we are going to go ahead and dive into it here tonight. 6 top 25 games as well as other primetime matchups that are going to be happening over the course of this weekend. We're going to specifically take a deep dive into those 6 top 25 matchups that are going to be happening this Saturday, and it's going to be jammed packed. A lot of action happening in the Pac-12 in particular in terms of seeing these teams, really separate themselves in that Pac-12 title race. I think that's going to have some huge implications of this upcoming weekend. We also have some other games that are happening in other parts of the country as well. SEC's got a big top 25 game. We also have 2 other games that feature the Big Ten. Iowa's taking on Penn State. Ohio State heavily involved in that game against Notre Dame. Probably the game of the week, I think, here in week number 4. So what we're going to do in tonight's podcast is what I'm going to dive into. We're going to dive into each of those top 25 matchups for week number 4 for this Saturday in particular. But first and foremost, I am going to show you the new Any Given Saturday power rating poll that I just finished putting together. That's why it's taken so long to get this podcast out, was because I was just trying to dive into what's happening with the poll. And frankly, it's been really busy at work. So that's why I wanted to get a second podcast in, but I think we're going to have to settle on one for this week. We'll see what happens with next week, but hope you guys are excited for this Any Given Saturday podcast. If you are, do me a quick favor real fast and go ahead and smack that like button for me. I would truly appreciate it from the bottom of my heart if you did that, because what that is going to do is that's going to get it out to more college football fans like yourselves as we try to grow this fledgling college football community. And then on top of that too, speaking of trying to build on this community, guys, do me a massive favor as well. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button for me. I would truly appreciate that from the bottom of my heart as we're trying to continue to grow the channel as much as we can as we continue to dive into college football season. And with all that being said, got a lot happening on this podcast, as you may have heard. So let's not waste any more time. Let's go ahead and dive right into it. So we've had a pretty good college football weekend, a underrated college football weekend, I would say, back in week number 3. And even though it was a weekend in which we did not see any top 25 matchups happen, we've seen some teams really show themselves a little bit more, getting some more information on various teams. Some that's good, of course, and some that is, of course, not as good. So that has been reflected in this Any Given Saturday power ratings. Now, quick disclaimer before I jump into this alliteration of the Any Given Saturday power ratings going into week number 4. So these power ratings would, to me, determine who would be favored over whom if they were playing on a neutral site field. And this is also based on what these teams have currently done as of right now. This power rating poll doesn't necessarily project into the future. We just look at what they're doing right now because we're about a month into the season now. So a lot of the preseason data is not very relevant at this point, because now we actually have 3 or 4 games in which these teams have played, so we have plenty of information on these guys. And even though it is a long college football season, this is where I would have those teams power rated as of right now. So, all that considered, let's go ahead and dive into what we have going on with the Any Given Saturday power ratings going into week number 4. And we'll start from the bottom and we will begin to work our way up. Now, you guys can read. I think some of you, or at least all of us here, know how to see who is going to be playing against whom. Now, We'll start from 25, work our way up from 21. So I'm just going to talk about some notable teams on this list. So starting from 21 to 25, this is what those teams currently are. And what we see right off the get-go is that we are only going to have one new team in this power rating poll, and that is actually going to be the Florida Gators. Florida was not ranked going into their matchup against Tennessee. That applies to both the AP poll as well as the power rating poll as well. But they keep that win streak alive in terms of beating Tennessee in the swamp. It was a game that really Billy Napier needed to win. They had to find a way to win this game, and Florida was able to do that. Not only does that give that a little bit more national respect, as Florida is ranked number 25 in the entire country, but what we also get to see is Billy Napier's seat gets a little bit cooler as of right now. I think if this was a game where Florida did end up losing, I'm sure there was going to be some tough questions being asked down in Gainesville, but Florida found a way to get the win. They bounced back from their loss from earlier this season against Utah. Now they focus in on Charlotte. They have one last tune-up in that Charlotte game before they get into the rest of their SEC schedule. Now, we continue to move through this top 25. We now go from 16 to 20, and from here on out, we see a little bit more of movement. Tennessee, Alabama, and Michigan, those are three teams as of note. Tennessee, I think we know why we saw them fall 5 spots. It was a notable change between now and last week. Tennessee losing on the road to an unranked Florida team. Yeah, I hate to see it. And it was a team that started off somewhat strong. You know, they put up plenty of points against Virginia. So it looked like it was going to be as explosive an offense as last season. But as they dive in, you know, haven't looked great against Austin Peay. And then now they have their first loss of the season. So they fall down 5 spots because of that. But they weren't even the worst looking SEC team, in my opinion. That's power rated in this top 25. Alabama, I had ranked number 12 in the country in these power rating polls after their first loss of the season to Texas. They went on the road for the first time this season, and they took on Southern Florida. Now, this game was a lot more competitive than what many people thought could have possibly made it happen. And it's not even that we found out that Tyler Buchner was not really the guy. This was something that I talked about in the SEC preview going into this season. I wasn't that big on Alabama from a conference championship, national championship perspective because they brought in Tyler Buchner, and I was never big on Tyler Buchner. He had 3 touchdowns, 5 interceptions last season, and we saw him get his first start against USF, and he did not look good. He showed a lot of why Notre Dame went into the transfer portal, why they got Sam Hartman. And yeah, so Alabama, they fall down 6 spots. They did beat USF. It was only 17-3 though. What's really scary about that particular game, it's not even that the quarterbacks were bad. I think they do realize that Milrose does need to be the starting quarterback for Alabama moving forward. But there were times where USF straight up looked more physical than University of Alabama. I mean, we had USF guys running over Alabama players, you know, a few times. I mean, it's not that Alabama wasn't a more physical team overall. I think they were, but just the fact that you're seeing Alabama players getting ran over by teams that are not even the best in their own conference in the group of 5. You know, Southern Florida, I don't think has those expectations to win the American Conference necessarily. So really concerned by Alabama. They play against Ole Miss this upcoming week, and we're going to talk about that Ole Miss game a little bit later. And then we got Michigan. Michigan played against Bowling Green. They were in a dogfight against Bowling Green. Don't get it twisted. This was a closer game than what people realize. It was 7-6 midway through the second quarter. J.J. McCarthy did not have a good game, and I don't know if it was one of those things where Michigan is kind of overlooking their schedule, looking later on. They can't play like that in Big Ten conference action because Rutgers is a little bit better of a team than what people realize. Not saying that Michigan will lose to Rutgers, but I certainly think it could be a closer game than what the spread is currently showing right now. So Michigan, hopefully with the addition of Jim Harbaugh coming back, he has finished serving his suspension. If not, that could be a major problem for the Michigan Wolverines. Because if not, then I mean, this is a team that's trying to make it its third playoff appearance in the last 3 years. That could be a problem as they go up against more of the top flight teams in the country, such as an Ohio State and a Penn State. So Michigan, we'll see how their effort is this coming week against Rutgers. Now we move into the top 15. Nothing as crazy going further out in terms of significant movements. Georgia, they did struggle against a team in South Carolina that, frankly, they gave up 9 sacks against North Carolina back in week number 1. So this is a woeful offensive line, and Georgia struggled against that team. They actually needed a big second half in order to come back and win that game. So Georgia's still undefeated. They still have all of their goals and expectations in front of them, but I am also concerned about that Georgia team. So that's why, while they were ranked number 5 in the power ratings, that's why they were moved down 6 spots, because the model was seriously concerned about how they handled South Carolina. They expected, frankly, a lot better performance. Now, going into the top 10, we do have one change here of note. LSU, it was number 18 last week. They move up 8 spots all the way up to number 10 in the Any Given Saturday top 25. So big win by LSU, opening up conference play against Mississippi State. Thought that was a game that could have been closer, maybe a 1-possession game. The model had it as -8 for LSU, but expect it to be closer than what that spread says. Was not the case. LSU controlled the game from the get-go. Impressive performance, and they'll try to continue building that momentum as they dive deeper into SEC conference play. But they were actually the biggest risers of the week, so you love to see that. And then we'll close things out with the top 5. OSU, Ohio State, I think they found their identity on the offensive side of the ball. And you could sit back and scoff at that idea, like, listen, they played against Western Kentucky. I don't even know where Western Kentucky is. That's from the casual. We know where Western Kentucky is. Western Kentucky is in the Conference USA. And yeah, they are a group of 5 team, but I have them winning the Conference USA this year. This is not as much of a slouch of a team as what we think of Western Kentucky, right? So that being said, defense looked good, and the offense finally starting to find an identity. I think that's perfect that they're starting to do that, because they will have a tough test against Notre Dame, which we'll talk about later. And I do have a new number 1 team in the country. It did used to belong to Florida State, but that is no longer going to be the case. Florida State did struggle against Boston College, nearly losing that game to Boston College. If it wasn't for a school record and penalties, then yeah, that could have been a game where we saw a big time upset. But unfortunately, Boston College was not disciplined enough. So Florida State was able to escape with the win, but they're no longer the number 1 team. They fell to number 5. Washington is currently the number 1 rated team in this power rating system. And Washington's been the type of team that's just been a machine to continue through this season, right? Because Washington, they started the year, they beat Boise State. Could have been considered a trap game at the time, but they blew Boise State out of the water, and then they just continue to do the hard work. Most recently, beating Michigan State 41-7. We knew that offense was going to be good at Washington, but I think that defense is better than what people realize. Washington, I have my eye on you. I can't wait to see what you do in this next week. Not sure. I don't think you're on bye. Just continue the hard work. And yeah, we do have Washington ranked number 1 in the Any Given Saturday power ratings going into week number 4. But what do you guys think? Do you agree with my ratings? Would you move someone up, move someone down? Let me know in that comment section with what you guys think about that. But now that we've Taking a little bit of a dust up of the past, we now look towards the future. And I mentioned this earlier, 6 top 25 matchups this upcoming weekend. Guys, this might be the greatest college football weekend of our lifetimes. It's not even just because of those 6 top 25 games. We also have some other big time matchups that we're certainly going to keep an eye on for sure. How about Clemson taking on Florida State? Could be seeing a passing of the baton, a battle between two philosophies. We also have, Oklahoma going to Cincinnati. Cincinnati making their debut in Big 12 conference action. And I wanted to mention that game specifically. I'm going to be at that game on Saturday, being a Southern Ohio boy, born and raised. So I'm really excited to be in that game in person. Maybe we live stream that game, or not live stream it, but maybe we live stream that pre-game day experience. Let me know what you guys think of that idea. Maybe we talk about some good bets to make for the Saturday slates. Just keep that in the back of your mind. But how about the conference that is going to dissolve after this year? This conference, of those 6 games that are top 25 ranked opponents going up against each other, 3 of them involve the Pac-12 completely. Just an incredible story by the Pac-12 in its last hurrahs, sadly, but it's been very exciting to watch the Pac-12 go to work, getting all of those teams ranked. They might be the best conference top to bottom right now. They might not have the best top. Who knows if the Pac-12 gets a playoff team again this year, or if they cannibalize themselves like they have in the past. But at the same time, this is going to be a big weekend to determine who's going to solidify themselves in the race to go to the Pac-12 championship, because there is no divisions in this conference. Okay, so what that means is that you're going to see some parity. You're going to see the 2 best teams straight up, regardless of where those 2 teams are located, go to the conference championship game. So all that considered, let's dive into that Pac-12 a little bit more. And I have an opportunity to finally talk about this team. Colorado ranked number 19 in the entire country. They will be taking on the number 10 ranked Oregon Ducks at home at Autzen Stadium. Big test for Colorado, because certainly there has been a hype train built up on this Colorado team. A Colorado team, mind you, that went 1-11. And I'm sure that we saw this in the Colorado State game. We saw a kind of a goalpost move of expectations. We did see that after they won their first couple of games against TCU and Nebraska as well, barely surviving against Colorado State. Some people going in talking about how they shouldn't have even been in that position in the first place. Because, guys, remember, this team won 1 game last year. This was, to many people, the worst team in the Power 5. And now Colorado, first year with Deion Sanders, prime time, has Colorado ranked number 19 in the country. 19th. And got them on making them must-watch TV. I mean, guys, you want to talk about a turnaround at Colorado from a cultural perspective. I mean, we're talking about a record setter in terms of number of eyeballs that were watching a game that didn't end until 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. A game that starts at 10:30. Who would have thought? Who would have thought Colorado would have accomplished that? Pepper Ridge Farm remembers. But again, let's not sugarcoat it. This Colorado team is going to need to bring its A game if they want to take down the Oregon Ducks. There hasn't been as much national conversation about Oregon, particularly what Bo Nix has been doing. Been pretty quiet on Bo Nix nationally in terms of Heisman Trophy conversations. But Bo Nix quietly is having a good season too. Led the Oregon offense to being one of the most explosive offenses in college football. An offense that's averaging 587 yards a game, mind you. Bo Nix has not turned the ball over as of yet, has nearly 900 yards passing, 8 touchdowns, and in 2 of the 3 games, he didn't even complete the games. You know, those games turned into blowouts. The only exception was that Texas Tech game, which, oh boy, that was certainly a battle. It was a trap game in its own right, but Oregon was able to navigate it so far. But this Colorado team knows how to move the ball through the air, and this offense is the focal point is Shadir Sanders. Sanders comes in 1,200 yards passing, 10 touchdowns, has only thrown 1 interception. A third of those yards have come in the fourth quarter and overtime. So you want to talk about what you need to do if you're Oregon. You need to pull away from Oregon. You need to pull away from Colorado as soon as you can. If this is a close game in the fourth quarter, I mean, Shadir Sanders, he's a dog. That dude can absolutely play. I've watched him play a couple of times so far this year, parts of games, and just the way he throws the football, he just has a beautiful spiral. The kid is just a natural thrower of the ball, and he makes good decisions. He's a very good decision maker, which is really awesome to see. And that's, what you get when you have someone like Primetime as your dad and as your head coach too. It's just been an awesome story. But Sanders is going to have to continue that, right? I have concerns about this Colorado team. One, they can't really run the ball. They're averaging 61 yards a game in their 3 games, right? So if Sanders struggles through this game, this offense is going to struggle as well. And we saw some of that in the Colorado State game. Had to be an amazing comeback in order for the Buffaloes to remain unbeaten. And at the same time, they're also going to have to find a way to get some stops. That front 7 is certainly going to be tested. I thought that front 7 was gashed pretty well in the TCU game in particular. Nebraska wasn't really able to take advantage of that mismatch, but Oregon is averaging 230 yards on the ground a game. And they got a nice running back in Irving, who's only carried the ball 27 times. He's averaging 9 yards a carry. So that kid can absolutely run the rock. It's a very dangerous backfield at the University of Oregon. We'll take a look at what the line says and what the model says as well. So right now, as of this morning, the line is currently at -21 in favor of the Oregon Ducks. The model thinks that this is going to be a borderline blowout at 29.5 that Oregon is favored by. So what do we think of that? So for me, when I see that, I can't help but think to myself, okay, so do I expect Colorado to win this game? I don't. I do think that's going to be a more entertaining game than what the line says, than what the model is given credit for. I'm going to disagree with the model. I don't necessarily think that this is going to be a blowout. I do think that Oregon is going to win this game. They are at home, and even if they weren't at home, even if it's on a neutral side field, I think Oregon is a better team. But I also don't think that Oregon is going to cover. I think Colorado makes this a more entertaining game, but I feel like Oregon will pull away in the second half, and Coach Prime will be handed his first loss at the FBS level. But you want to talk about surpassing expectations. I actually put a bet slip in back in April, and at the time, Colorado was listed for their over-under at like 4.5 wins. They're well on their way to hitting that, and that was just a brilliant investing strategy at the time. So, and that's coming into fruition, but I don't expect Colorado to win this game. I'm pulling for them, but I do think Oregon wins this one and continues to keep it moving, get to 4-0. But speaking of the Pac-12, speaking of that specific coast, at the same time, we have yet another top 25 game that is going to be happening at the exact same time that we have that Colorado and Oregon game. Guys, this is the type of weekend where you need to have multiple screens going at the same time, if you're able to afford to do so. Now, we have UCLA and Utah that are going to kick off. This is also a free 30 game, and this game is going to be on Fox Sports. Utah is 3-0, but we haven't really seen that explosiveness out of their offense. Their highest score is the 31 that they've scored last week against Weber State, and Weber State is a good FCS team. I believe they are ranked in the FCS top 25, but we haven't seen them really show much consistency on the offensive side of the ball between their Florida game and their Baylor game as well. Baylor game, they could have certainly lost. They actually needed a little bit of help to actually come back and win that one. UCLA been very quiet under the radar. We haven't seen a lot of talk about UCLA, but they've quietly also gone off to a 3-0 start. I think this is a game where, we're going to see them play for the first time. Like, a lot of people are going to see UCLA play for the first time. They played against Coastal Carolina and San Diego State. They looked fine in both their games. We've had them ranked in the top 25 this entire season. The AP poll took a little time to catch up to that. It's going to be a difference of a couple of styles. We know about the Chip Kelly offense. We know that Chip Kelly likes to be a little bit more up-tempo, not as crazy as insane as he was in his golden days back when he was the head coach of Oregon, but he still likes to be pretty up-tempo, and his team likes to put up yards. His team has averaged over 500 yards of total offense per game thus far. But Utah is an interesting team in the fact that they like to play a different brand of football, or at least that they've had with Cameron Rising. Without him, he has not played yet this season. So Utah, their offense is averaging less than 400 yards a game, but they allowed less than 70 yards on the ground. Now, I do like to point out that UCLA has also done a pretty good job of stopping the run, averaging 69 yards allowed per game. I think we can all agree that that's pretty nice, if I say so myself. Pretty darn nice. So, what's the key into this one? First, I feel we got to address the elephant in the room. Does Cam Rising play in this game? We thought that we could see him in the Weber State game, but that didn't necessarily happen. Cam Rising was out after he tore his ACL in the Rose Bowl. Didn't see him against Florida. Didn't see him against Baylor. Did not see him in that Weber State game, but according to Pete Fermal on ESPN, looks like the September 23rd game against UCLA is a logical targeting date as Rising is continuing to practice. So he has been practicing with the team. Does he play in this game now? Now, Utah hasn't need Cam Rising yet, but at the same time, I do think that they're going to need Cam Rising to win this particular game. Because as of right now, we've seen some uncertainty as a result of Cam Rising not playing in this particular game. Right now, the line says it's a 4.5. Any given Saturday model gives it a little bit more credit at 11.5 favorite for the Utah Utes. They found a way to get it done before, but can Utah find a way to, if Cam Rising doesn't play, can they produce enough points? Because I think this is going to be the type of game you're going to have to get to 30 because I have a feeling that this is going to be a little bit more of a high-scoring game than what people are going to realize. Utah's only done that one time without Cam Rising. Now, on the other hand, can UCLA avoid making mistakes? They do have a freshman at the quarterback position, true freshman, might I add. And so far, this true freshman in Dante Moore, he's lived up to the hype. He has lived up to the hype for the UCLA Bruins. Has a 62% completion percentage, 7 touchdowns, 1 interception. He's been good. He's been really good. But this is going to be his first real test as well. I'm really curious to see how that goes, how that true freshman handles that environment, because Rice-Eccles Stadium in Salt Lake, Utah, that is a good college football stadium. That is a quality college football environment as well. It's going to be nothing like the first road game that UCLA has, where it went on the road against San Diego State. They're playing in a pro stadium. That's not going to be the same. It just doesn't feel the same. It doesn't hit right, per se. And on top of that, who's going to be able to establish that running game a little bit more? Both defenses dominant against the run. Who breaks down the, or at least you don't have to like run for a ridiculous amount of yards, but at least keep it honest. If Cam Rising doesn't play, keep that pressure off of Nate Johnson, who is a pretty young player, a pretty inexperienced player in his own right. He is a freshman redshirt who threw one pass last season. He's obviously seen the field a little bit more than that. So I'm really curious how this goes. Now, as for how I think this game happens, I'm going to go with the model here in this regard. I do think Utah wins. I do think Utah covers as well. And a big reason for that is they are going to be at home. It's going to be an electric environment. And they're getting better on offense. They are certainly getting better on the offensive end. We know how good that defense is. And I just can't bet against the Utah Utes when they are not just defending Pac-12 conference championships, but also they've done it 2 years in a row too. So yeah, that being said, we are going to roll with the Utah Utes in this one, and I think that they're going to cover as well. So we already got a couple of games down. We now move on to what we have for the third top 25 matchup that we have going on. And that third top 25 matchup is going to be that Ole Miss and Alabama game. And this game in particular, it's gonna be intriguing. Ole Miss and Alabama. This is a 3:30 kickoff as well. This is going the same time as Colorado and Oregon, and the same time as UCLA and Utah. This has some SEC West implications. Now, for both of these teams, this is going to be their first conference game. We saw LSU technically be in the lead with that 1-0 start. So both teams will have to play against LSU. Big implications to put themselves in the driver's seat early for this SEC West matchup. Ole Miss has looked pretty good in its 2 FBS matchups. One against Tulane on the road, beat Georgia Tech 48-23. Not completely sold about that defense, but offensively it looks just as explosive, if maybe not more explosive. But Alabama's kind of singing a different tune, kind of off to that slow start that we're not used to a Nick Saban team doing, right? So Nick Saban, his team, last 2 weeks, they lost to Texas at home. And you know, that was a game where it's an upset, but it's not a massive surprise, right? The massive surprise for Alabama was they only beat Southern Florida by 2 touchdowns, and that they only managed to put 17 points against an American Conference team that is probably not going to compete for the American Conference Championship. We got to keep it real there. I don't see USF going very far within American Conference action. No offense to any USF fans. They've gone back to Milroe, and while Milroe does have his flaws, I do think that he is the best quarterback for the job for the Alabama Crimson Tide. I never believed that Tyler Buchner was the guy. They also gave Ty Simpson a shot, and Ty Simpson, 6 of 10, 78 yards or on the season. He went 5 for 9, 73 yards. Just didn't look that efficient with this offense. Had negative yards rushing too, and a rushing touchdown, of course. So they go back to Jalen Milroe. I think Jalen Milroe is certainly that guy. And the one thing about Jalen Milroe is that he does have that dual threat capability. Last year, he averaged 8 yards a carry when he got a chance to carry the football, ended up with 206 free yards and a touchdown. So when he didn't have his opportunities last year, he did do a fantastic job of running the ball. So I do think that now that Jalen Milroe is back as the starting quarterback, perhaps for the rest of the season as well, I do think Alabama does look better on the offensive side of the ball than what we saw last week. However, what I am personally worried about is in that USF game, they at times just didn't look like the more physical team. I mean, yes, they had more rushing yards than USF, but it really wasn't that different. Alabama had 200 rushing yards, while Southern Florida had 177. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't a pretty day for the Alabama offense. They have to make sure that they aren't one-dimensional. Got to get Jalen Milroe in rhythm. Starts off by, hey, give him some easy throws, give him some easy completions. He hasn't played in a couple of weeks. At the same time, can they contain Jackson Dart? Because Jackson Dart is certainly the centerpiece of this Ole Miss offense. He has 7 touchdowns through the air, 2 touchdowns on the ground. He already has over 1,000 total yards. They're more than capable of moving this ball down the field. So the Alabama defense is going to have to step up. However, I also think that this is one of those games that the over, it should certainly be in play here. The over-under as of right now is at like 55. Last time I seen that. I think this game ends up in the 60s personally, because I do expect that offense to be better than what we previously saw. At the same time, I do not expect it to be one of those things where Alabama is going to win like a low-scoring game. So that's just something to really think about there. So, what's that mean? How does this game turn out? So what I think happens in this particular game is that maybe we see Alabama get off to a good start just because they are at home. Bryant-Denny Stadium is going to be rocked because there is a legitimate chance that Alabama loses this game. We already see it reflected in the line. As of this morning, that line is at -7. But I have doubts. I have doubts, ladies and gentlemen, about Alabama being able to stop Jackson Dart. Because I don't think Jackson Dart is as good as Quinn Ewers. And Quinn Ewers was able to go off against Alabama. I think Jackson Dart could possibly do the same thing. He's not too bad himself. So the model has Ole Miss winning -1.5. Instead of agreeing with Vegas, I'm agreeing with the model. I have Ole Miss going into Bryant-Denny Stadium, and I will ultimately have we're gonna end up having Lane Kiffin, the head coach of the Ole Miss program, get his first win against his former boss, his former assistant. Is gonna be over, and Ole Miss is gonna get the 4-0, while Alabama, they're gonna be, for some, they're gonna be left for dead. Gonna get their second loss of the season. And it's going to be a difficult conversation in terms of is the dynasty over at Alabama? Is Nick Saban past his prime? I'm just predicting that could happen after this weekend. But wait, there's more. As we, I sound like the guy off of the like the Sham Wow commercials. Yeah, there is going to be more. How about at 7 o'clock on Saturday night? This is also a game that's going to be on Fox. 2 undefeated teams. One team that's been ranked the entire time. One kind of had to earn it a little bit more. Oregon State, number 14 in the entire country, taking on a Washington State squad that's going to be ranked, that is ranked number 21 as of right now. They were not ranked in the top 25. But I will say this. They didn't struggle against Colorado State. They won by 26 in regulation. They pulled the upset against Wisconsin too, and they handled their business against Northern Colorado. So Washington State finally getting the flowers that they deserve. And unlike what we saw in the Yono's Mike Leach days, where the offense was the explosive team and defense had question marks, And of course, I have to say, rest in peace to Mike Leach, one of the greatest college football figures ever. But going into the season, there was questions about Washington State's offense. The defense should have been good. And not only has Washington's defense lived up to the hype, they're allowing less than 400 yards a game so far. We're seeing the same old Washington State offense that we've seen from years past, averaging 400 passing yards a game. Cam Ward, the quarterback of this Washington State football team, transferring in from Incarnate Wood a couple of years ago. Took him a little bit to find his rhythm. It was a solid season. 3,200 yards, 23 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. But it wasn't maybe what Washington State fans expected. He certainly found that rhythm now. Almost 1,000 yards, hasn't thrown a single interception yet. Taking real good care of the football. Extremely good care of the football. That's for sure. And this matchup also has a greater meaning, as this could be the 2 remaining teams of the Pac-12. Now, they haven't mentioned going into a different conference yet or deciding that they're going independent. So these 2 teams, they might be sticking around in the Pac-12 and trying to rebuild this conference from the ground up. And so far, what we've seen for this first quarter of the season, these 2 teams are Power 5 teams. There's no question about that. They shouldn't have been left behind. The rest of the conference is doing them absolutely dirty. But let's go into the game. DJU, quarterback of Oregon State, not too bad in his own right. 630 yards, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I think that it's clear that DJU was not the problem at Clemson. I think it's more of a coaching staff issue. And we've seen, of course, what has happened to Clemson. So that's what we know as of right now. I think DJU was not the problem at Clemson. He was not, he's not the biggest reason why DJU could not live up to expectations at Clemson. Now, that being said, DJU did struggle against San Diego State. And San Diego State, certainly a defensive school, coached by Brady Hoke, I believe. He went just 40 for 30 and was intercepted twice last week against San Diego State. But even though it was not what you would look for in terms of an offensive performance from this Oregon State squad, they still found a way to win. They still found a way to win by double digits. So what that shows is that even if DJU struggles, Oregon State is still going to at least be in this game, I think. I think this is a very good football team that even ranked at number 14 in the entire country. I do think that this Oregon State squad will remain competitive. And I expect this to be a very competitive game moving forward. The model has it at -1.5. As of right now on FanDuel, it's showing as -2.5 in terms of the Vegas line. I think this is going to be a sneaky good game. One that might be falling in between the cracks a little bit because of Notre Dame and Ohio State happening shortly after that. I don't know who's going to win this game, guys. I just don't have a good feel on who I think is going to win this game. But man, this is a tough one. I really like both teams. Because they do it in different ways too. I'm gonna side with Oregon State. I don't feel very confident about that pick necessarily, though, because it really could go either way. Should be an exciting game. Could be a nice little appetizer while you're waiting for the Ohio State Notre Dame game. Or it could be a game that captures your attention completely. It certainly wouldn't surprise me if it makes some waves around college football, which it definitely will. It definitely will for sure. So 2 more games that I want to go ahead and preview. We'll save that possible game of the week for a little bit later. But here we go. Iowa ranked number 24 in the entire country. They're going to be taking on the number 7 ranked Penn State Nittany Lions. Big conference implications, especially for Penn State, because in the Big Ten East for Penn State, there really is no margin for error where you do have a team like Ohio State. You do have a team like Michigan, who has traditionally, or at least in the past few years, have been one of the best teams in college football. So Penn State has no room for error. They have the third best odds to win the Big Ten this year. Iowa is number 4. Iowa is, of course, the favorite as of right now to get out of the Big Ten West as of right this second. So what is at stake in particular in this game? So the Hawkeyes, Iowa is 3-0 right now. They're trying to get to 4-0 for the third time since 2019. And this is a place where head coach Kirk Ferentz has won before. His team's last couple of games at Beaver Stadium, Iowa has been able to win. Granted, one of them was in the COVID season back in 2020 when the stadium was empty. Iowa actually had a pulse on offense that day. They won 41-21. This atmosphere is going to be a lot different. This atmosphere is going to be absolutely wild. Ninth game, first and foremost, is going to be kicking off at 7:30 on CBS, and it's going to be the whiteout game as well. So what are we going to watch for? What are we going to watch for in this particular game? So I think the big key here is Drew Aller taking on that vaunted Iowa defense. I don't need to tell you how good Iowa's defense is. Iowa has one of the best defenses in the entire country. They have not allowed more than 14 points in the entire season so far. What has always held back Iowa is the inconsistencies on offense. Now, we saw Iowa actually have a pulse on offense last week, scoring 41 on Western Michigan. Do I think they score 41 on Penn State? No, I don't think anyone is expecting that at all. But what does Iowa defensive coordinator likes to do? Phil Parker, he's the defensive coordinator for Iowa. He likes to take away the big plays and is trying to create it to where the opposing offense has to be patient. Has to absolutely be patient. Can Drew Aller do that? Drew Aller hasn't thrown an interception yet, but they haven't played a team like Iowa so far this year. They have not played a defense like Iowa. West Virginia certainly don't got that. Delaware certainly don't got that. Illinois might have been a similar type of defense last year, but it's not last year now, is it? So can they remain patient and accept the fact that they're going to have 8, 9, 10 play drives in order to score on a consistent basis? This is not going to be one of those 2-play 90-yard drive types of games. I just don't think there's going to be a lot of explosive plays necessarily in this game. And that's really important because that's going to play into what Iowa wants to do. Iowa wants to make this an ugly game. They want to pull you into the mud pile and make it as dirty as possible. They really want to make you earn it. Now, that being said, I don't think Penn State has to score that many points to score because Penn State's got a pretty good defense in their own right. I think Penn State's defense is also pretty good on its own too. They've only allowed 267 yards the entire season so far. That's actually less than what Iowa has been able to allow over the course of the season. And you can argue so far that Penn State has played a similar caliber of opponents than what Iowa has. Not saying that Penn State's defense is better than Iowa's defense, but I also think that, okay, Penn State's defense can also play at a pretty high level. Can Cade McNamara show up too? That's the other question that I have in this game as well, because Cade McNamara, there's a reason why I had to transfer, right? There's a reason why I had to transfer. He was okay at Michigan. He wasn't great. Eventually lost his job to the J.J. McCarthy, 5-star quarterback. He's starting again for Iowa. It hasn't been pretty. 53%, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. he's going to need to bring his A game if Iowa has a shot to win this game. Now, does that happen? And this jumps right into, with what I think is going to happen in this game, I do think it's going to be a little bit of a low-scoring game. The over-under, well, I don't think it's going to be, I don't know if it's going to be under 40, but I'd certainly see this game being in the 40s. And I think Penn State is going to pull away in the second half. I think Drew Aller does get flustered a little bit in the first half. It's going to be one of those games where it's going to be pretty close. 7-3 is going to be your score. Then they go into the locker room. They figure things out in the second half. Penn State pulls away in that second half in particular. And I think Penn State wins. Right now, the line is at 14.5 for Vegas, 16.5 for the Any Given Saturday model. I don't know if they cover, but I think they get close to covering this score. And I do think that Penn State ultimately wins this game. And now we get into a game that has one of the biggest college football playoff implications. In September, I don't like talking about college football playoff too much because there's so much unknown information that's out there. But this is an exception. This is going to have a huge impact on the college football playoff. Ohio State, ranked number 6 in the country, 3-0, going on the road, going to South Bend, Indiana. That's also where College Game Day is going, by the way. They're taking on Notre Dame, a 4-0 Notre Dame squad, ranked number 9 in the country as well. For Ohio State, it's taken them a couple of weeks to figure it out, but I think they're starting to find their identity on offense. I think Kyle McCord is starting to figure things out. Notre Dame, on the other hand, I think they have been rolling since the get-go. Great win versus Navy to get things started. And then they proceed, possible trap game against NC State. They handled their business against NC State, looked good in that game too, and then do what you're supposed to do against a MAC team. They blew out the MAC team. So this is going to be Notre Dame's biggest game, arguably one of its biggest games of the season. And the next 4 games for Notre Dame is also going to really tell us how good this Notre Dame team is. Forget about the Ohio State game for a split second. Look at the schedule for the next, going into October. So after the Ohio State game, they go on the road against Duke, and Duke's for real. It doesn't feel real, but Duke is a good team, ranked number 18 in the country. Louisville has an outside shot of going to the ACC championship. They go on the road to face them, and then they take on USC, who's ranked number 5 in the country. That's what their next 4 games entail. So, man, if Notre Dame can go 3-1 in that stretch somehow, that is going to really bolster the college football playoff resume for Notre Dame. As for Ohio State, this is going to be a big test for Ohio State as well. The only test that we'll see them have in the month of September, Indiana, Youngstown State, Western Kentucky, games that Ohio State has played, expected to win, but offense has taken a little bit too quick. So we talked about what's at stake. We know that this game has college football playoff implications. So what's the biggest key in this game? I think that's what I'm really curious about. What's the biggest key? And it goes back to Kyle McCord taking on the defense of Notre Dame. This is going to be the best defense that Kyle McCord has faced. Now, ever since he's been handed the starting quarterback job full time, in wake of their little 2-game experience with Devin Brown, Kyle McCord has looked more comfortable, and it showed in that game against Western Kentucky. But this is only going to be his second career road start as well. I think, and this one is with a big-time matchup as well. So going back to 2021 or 2022, he only played really in the Akron game. I want to say that game was at Akron. Not completely sure, but I think it was. So does it really count as a road start? I don't know, boss. I really don't know. This is going to be the toughest challenge that Kyle McCord has faced. Now, He's improved in those last couple of games, completing 77% of his passes, 576 yards, 6 touchdowns. And he's got great weapons around him too. He has Marvin Harrison Jr. He has Mbuke. He has that one of the best receiving corps in the country. Plus, you have the two-headed monster headed up by Trayvon Henderson. This is a legit offense with one of the best skill groups in the country. So, does Notre Dame get pressure? One, does he make Kyle McCord uncomfortable? Because if Kyle McCord is uncomfortable, who knows how he handles that pressure? And vice versa, how does the Ohio State defensive front handle Notre Dame's offensive line? Because I do think that Notre Dame does have one of the best offensive lines in the country. JDT, AP preseason second team All-American for Ohio State, is going to be tested in this game. He's going to need to come up big because Notre Dame might have the edge in the trenches here, especially with Ohio State. They're a little inexperienced. They have to go into the transfer portal to find a plug-and-play person, a former 4-star from San Diego State. He's been fine, but he hasn't been tested like this yet. He has certainly not been tested in this game yet. Not to mention, Notre Dame got themselves a quarterback now. Last year, they were playing Tyler Buchner, and I said it before, I said it again, not a big Tyler Buchner guy. Just don't really believe in Tyler Buchner. I don't think he could ever be like a high-end FBS level quarterback. Sam Hartman's a different story. Sam Hartman's been balling out in his 4 games. 1,000 yards, 15 total touchdowns so far this year. This game is going to be in South Bend as well. It's going to be an electric environment at Notre Dame Stadium as well. Right now, the game line, Ohio State is a slight favorite, a 3.5-point favorite. But the Any Given Saturday model has it at -1, a -1 point favorite as of right now. So, do I agree with Vegas or do I agree with the model? At the end of the day, it's going to hurt me saying this. As someone that does actually support Ohio State, it's not my favorite team, but I like Ohio State. I follow Ohio State football personally. I think Notre Dame wins this game. I think this game does end up being close. I think Sam Hartman is the more poised quarterback than what Kyle McCord is. And I think it's going to be a competitive game. I think this is going to be a fun game that's going to be able to go ahead and live up to that hype. We'll see what happens in this matchup. I'm going with Notre Dame, but it's going to be extraordinarily close. So we covered all the big-time matchups here for week number 4. All 6 top 25 matchups. We found a way to cover them all. So we'll see what happens this weekend in regards. I did mention it earlier, but I am going to be making a trip to Nipper Stadium. Maybe what we'll end up doing is maybe in the pregame of the noon kickoffs, if I have some time in my hands, maybe we can go live on YouTube for a little bit, live from Nipper Stadium. Could talk about my thoughts on this Oklahoma and Cincinnati game while I'm here in the building, and maybe I can give my thoughts on some other games. If you guys want to go ahead and ask me in regards to what we're feeling, like in terms of with in regards to what game you want me to talk about, I can give like a little bit of a like first thoughts kind of thing, and then also let you guys know what the model thinks. That helps you guys out as well for your betting endeavors, since I did not get around to doing a 4-for-4 special for this week. So guys, I'm gonna sign off. My voice is it's on the verge of giving out. It's been a long week, but Saturday is almost here. Our salvation is almost here. Hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. I appreciate you. If you made it through this entire thing, by the way, you are the real MVP. I just want to make sure y'all know that from the bottom of my heart. And if you enjoyed this pod, make sure you go ahead, smack that like button, because what that does is that's going to get this video out to more college football fans like yourself. And as we're trying to build this thing from the ground up, it would really help me out tremendously if you really do support this channel. Hit that subscribe button. I know there's a lot of you that do watch this content, but is not subscribed to the channel. Matter of fact, watch time is over 95% of non-subscribers. Join that subscriber group, man. Be a day one, an A1 since day one, baby. You see how the size of his channel, but hey, with that being said, I'm your host, Jake. I'm going to get ready to sign off, but hope you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care of this weekend. Be safe and enjoy every moment of one of the best college football weekends of all time. Take care, everybody.